On this week's program, Huckleberry Spyder makes 0 cents on session 0. Lil Brudder has a little brain. JD Sauvage isn't speaking anyone's language. A very short man shows a very low IQ when it comes to dragons. And an old video reminds us all that when you say Matt Mercer is a DM, the M means moron. That's right, folks, I'm Daniel, and this is Driving and Dragons, and you are strapped in for yet another Monday where we see who used intelligence as a dump stat. Before we get started with stupid, let's touch on the evergreen topics of what to do and what's coming up. So what to do? Like the video, hype the video, share the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 1,000 subs before Easter. Do you like what I do here? Do you just want to see someone win a free car? If the answer to either of those is yes, well, my Patreon channel memberships and all the super stickers, super thanks, and super chats I get on the channel goes to building and acquiring cars to give away. I'm pretty close to having the funds needed to ship the 74 Dodge Dart from New England down to the heart of Dixie, so that's very exciting. And in case you didn't know, if you hit the little 3 dots next to download below the video on PC, or if you scroll over the buttons below the title of the video on mobile, you'll see a little heart with a $sign in it. If you click on that, you can do what is basically a super chat for a video and help support the channel projects. Corvid Codex project is moving forward, first via Lulu and later through a dedicated publishing service, so be on the lookout for that. I'll make sure you know. Volume 1 will drop in April, and both the paperback and ebook formats, and Volume 2 is slated for July. One last but certainly not least thing before we dive into the dumbassery, let's all take a moment to congratulate Jack, the Lost Lore Scholar, on the birth of his new son. May the blessings of a long, healthy, and peaceful life fall on the boy, if not a prosperous one. Now that all the housekeeping is done, let's see if we can make it through the show without an aneurysm. We kick things off with Huckleberry Spyder, whose old-school grognardery has led him to one of the tired old language traps that has claimed many an angry old man shouting at clouds. You see, Grand DM posted about the generally bad advice that Session 0 solves everything, and he had 2 choices. And spoiler alert, he chose poorly. You see, he could have piped up and pointed out that Session 0, properly run, can curtail a lot of in-game problems, but that no amount of Session 0 is going to make up for a disruptive, self-centered player, or even one that is just a bad fit for the group. They're not suddenly going to become somebody you want at the table. But if he did that, he wouldn't be on the show, would he? Instead, old Huckleberry comes out with the old angry grognard standby of Session 0 is bullshit. Only character rolling and prologue session is needed. This is both stupid and ahistorical. Session 0 has been a thing since the earliest days of the hobby. Hell, the first time I actually heard the term Session 0 was way back in the 3.0 days. That's 3.0, not 3.5. The only reason older Session 0s were more about prologues and character rolling was because we played almost exclusively in person and with people that we had established relationships with. Except in game shops and at conventions, where guess what? A lot of the quote-unquote modern Session 0 activities like establishing boundaries and expectations absolutely 100% took place. Session 0 has not changed. But because WotC and Paizo lumped it in with the safety tools, which are BS, the reactionary OSR has to show its ass anytime Session 0 comes up and pretend that it wasn't always a thing. So way to go, Spyder. You jumped the shark and you landed on a natural 3 intelligence. Lil Brudder decided to display the emptiness between his ears this week. He chose to weigh in on a video of Matt Mercer giving absolutely terrible DM advice that we'll discuss later. Well, at least he established that the WotC 5e crowd look up to Matt Mercer for a reason. His advice was awful, but it was better than what Lil Brudder spewed out of his keyboard. Every single DM railroads their players at least sometimes. The D&D community pretends like this is some great sin when their only sin is doing it poorly. Longtime viewers of this series know where this is going. Yet another moron who doesn't understand the definition of railroading. You're right, Lil Brudder. The sin is doing it poorly. Because railroading is doing it poorly. By definition, you numbskull. Mercer's advice is to railroad, which is bad, and is why his advice is a blight on the hobby. Railroading is not a linear story element. Hell, it isn't even putting the players in a situation where there's only one real viable solution to a scenario. Railroading is when you engineer a situation to force a player to make a specific decision and thus rob them of agency. The majority of DMs have railroaded their players before. That much is right. But the good ones learn better and don't do it again. The worst ones get online and defend the practice like you did. JD Sauvage went after WN Weaver and showed that when the Bro SR sends him, they certainly aren't sending their best. You see, Weaver mocked the Bro SR by asking if they actually used alignment languages, and then suggested that the failed and often mocked mechanic would be their next big breakthrough discovery in gaming. JD reacted by calling him a loser and then demonstrating that he has no idea how alignment languages were designed in AD&D. He chimed in with, "We use alignment language in real life, not just the game," which is idiotic. Oh, the concept sounds nuanced if you aren't paying attention or if you have the intellectual capacity of the typical bro. Alignment language is like how the left says words like problematic or anything coded, or how the right says things like woke. It's just the terminology we use within our own philosophical communities, you see. Except it isn't. It's a completely different language, like German, French, or Mandarin would be. And that's per the damn rule book. You know, the one that y'all are obsessed about rules is written from. It's a swing and a miss, Sauvage, but it's certainly on brand for the cult of Jeff Tard. So D&D Shorts dropped the video this week. It is just as inane as you might think it would be. Even worse, it's a response to Pointy Hat, who may be the most idiotic dungeon tuber of them all. What are these two mental midgets? Well, in D&D Shorts' case, actual midgets' problem? Dragons. Dragons in D&D suck. They're all the same stat block with minor alterations. It's just a palette swap. We need to fix it by making some all-new dragons. First off, where did the idea that creatures that are very closely related genetically should be wildly different in terms of stats? Is there a problem with big cats because lions, tigers, and leopards all have the same bite and claw damage and a rake attack? No. Because the things they share is what makes them all cats, while the minor differences is what makes them distinct. Maybe if you hadn't raced to simplify the absolute shit out of every aspect of the game, this wouldn't be so obvious. But these clowns are crying about palette swaps in a game that is desperate to be a tabletop video game. What it really is that these creatively bankrupt grifters have run out of D&D 5e fellatio techniques to make their videos about, so they waste their viewers' time with this kind of idiotic crap that does nothing but make their games less alive and less real. And speaking of Dungeon Tube, we come to it at last. The king of all Dungeon Tubers. Matt Mercer, Grand Poobah of Critical Role and architect of the downfall of good DMing. This video isn't new, but it came back up with a vengeance. Now, I have to say, and I have said it on this channel numerous times, that I don't know if Matt is a good DM or a bad one, because we've never actually seen him run a game. We've only seen him run's the wrong word. We've only seen him direct a cast in the production of an improv entertainment show. The Mercer Effect is not that your DM doesn't measure up. It's that you have been watching Fast and Furious, and now you're disappointed that you went to the drag strip and realized that nitrous isn't warp drive, and you don't shift 15 times in a quarter mile. But the video of Mercer shows him giving some of the absolute worst game master advice that I've seen in a very, very long time. Now, if you're running an actual play show to entertain viewers, it's not bad advice. But as we established, that's not actually playing. When they film the race, the Supra and the Charger are doing like 20 miles an hour. It just looks fast on the movie because of all the edits and cuts, kind of like how Critical Role only looks like D&D when they kind of polish it out there. It doesn't look like absolute railroading because the entire cast agreed ahead of time to get on the train and pretend like they're choosing where it goes. Mercer said that if the players miss a gem that will give them a vision that is important to the plot, you should stop them as they leave the room and tell them about this strong and powerful feeling they have that they need to go back in and look again. Prompt them to go back and do exactly the one thing you've decided they must do. There are a ton of options as a GM that you can take advantage of in this situation, and Mercer recommends like the second or third worst option. Hell, even the gem blasting the last character out of the room with a lore dump exposition beam is better than what he recommended. How about you ask what happens in the world around the characters if they miss this and thus don't act on it, and then change the narrative to suit? How about giving them another chance to find it elsewhere? How about not being an idiot to start with and making sure that if something is so damned important that there isn't a role for them to fail so they can't miss it in the first damn place? Seriously, how is this guy held up as some master GM when he advises people to make day one mistakes on purpose? The whole thing gives me a migraine. And if stupidity like this is to remain legal, the government should supply those of us with a functional brain a daily ration of BC headache powder. That's all I can take. Join me Thursday for a stream on game design, and I'll see you guys next time.